This is a quick tutorial on pulling a vacuum using the Sealed System Service Jig tool for R600 systems. This unique jig can benefit your repair process for the vacuum process. The initial setup is as follows. The low side blue hose is for the low side of the sealed system processing valve after a sealed system repair. Connect a micron gauge to the top center port of the jig tool marked vacuum gauge. The high side red hose is for the high side of the sealed system, which is typically the dryer stub. Connect the provided pressure gauge to the right side port of the jig tool marked pressure gauge. You will note this gauge is capable of 30 inches of mercury to a maximum of 240 psi, ideally taking readings of 120 psi and below. This gauge will allow you to evaluate the internal pressures during the vacuum process. Connect the vacuum hose to the center lower port of the jig tool marked vacuum hose. Connect the other side of the vacuum hose to your vacuum pump port. Important tip: the ability to pull a fast and effective vacuum depends on many things, from your equipment conditions, seals, and the changing of your vacuum pump oil on a normal basis. You have a separate shutoff valve to help isolate the vacuum pump during your decay tests. The left side port of the jig tool marked refrigerant and will be used to connect a pre-charged R600 can and hose. This will allow the charging hose to also be vacuumed during these steps. Turn on your vacuum pump and ensure all ports are capped and hoses are secure. Open the valve of the vacuum pump and the jig tool isolation valve for the vacuum. Observe that your micron gauge and pressure gauge very quickly drop into a vacuum and below 500 microns. This reduces, but not eliminates, the chance of a large leak at the jig tool, your connections to the vacuum pump, or the charging hose. Open your blue low side and red high side valve at the jig tool. Observe the rise of the micron gauge and pressure gauge and then the gradual lowering. Allow the vacuum to run until you achieve the current process requirements and pass the decay test. You will use the yellow isolation valve to isolate the sealed system for the decay test. Note, running the vacuum up to 30 minutes after achieving the initial 500 micron reading is possible depending on moisture and non-condensable levels. Using the vacuum pump yellow isolation valve at the jig tool can provide clues to the system's condition. If the micron gauge rises to 1000 microns within a short period, can indicate non-condensables and further vacuum is needed. Rises to 2000 microns or more in a short period may indicate a leak. Once the vacuum decay requirements have passed, do not disconnect your hoses since you are now ideally ready for the charging process. We hope the use of the jig tool simplifies the need for your sealed system repair process. Thanks for watching.